Corey and Christine again from Beyond Freelance. Thank you for joining in and listening or watching, whatever you're doing. Today, the question that we're going to try and answer is what recurring revenue options should we recommend? Someone mentioned passive income related to this too, and I wanted to just start off by trying to explain that I think these two terms get lumped together and that they're really quite different. And the idea with recurring revenue is that stuff that you do ongoing and there's work involved. That's getting someone on a retainer or doing, ongoing work. Whereas a passive income is essentially getting money with doing no work. Now, me and Christine were talking about this already. I'm not sure that there's any real, win out there where you do no work and you magically get money. There's normally, a lot of, work involved. But the idea with the passive income is that it's places where, you're essentially getting work for stuff that you've either done up front or for lower touch. And so I think, Christine, that's a good thing to sort of chat to you about, because one of those real big obvious places where the passive income sort of scenario sort of works is, creating something big up front, like a book or a course, which you've done. And obviously with that, there's a lot of initial work. There's a lot of, risk involved as well as that sort of stuff. But I thought I'd just sort of chat to and sort of get your thoughts on creating, a course, because that's probably a big one for people to sort of think about with passive income. Is that something, you've got any thoughts on?
Yeah. No, I was, when you were talking, I was thinking about, like the difference between like one-on-one and leveraged, leveraging your time, leveraging your work. And I think that creating a course kind of falls under that, the hope of the income that you're working in a leveraged way, and that you're going to get a return on that time invested. And, it's funny. I started designing to delight. I think the idea came around 2015. Created the course, did a beta run, I had like 3 really like kind of sad launches, like under 10K, and was ready to quit. And one of the things I discovered around creating courses is that I did not have a product problem. I had a marketing problem. And so I think one of the big things that you take on when you create that, when you're going to do work in that way, leverage that you're going to hopefully sell to a wider audience, or you were saying lower touch, like lower price, more people, go wide. You have to have your marketing dialed in. You don't have to, but I mean, it's
not going to be successful.
A big factor in your success. Where one-on-one, it's like you have a higher priced, item that you're selling to one person, or a smaller, maybe small group mentoring or whatever. It's a little easy. I wouldn't say it's an easier sell. It's just, it's the difference between, I think, going deep and going wide. The marketing really needs to be dialed in. And so, like you said, I do get reoccurring or passive income from those payments, but I've already done all that work. So when you go, I had a launch and it was, $50,000 or whatever it was, I can guarantee those people have already put in that much or more time into that.
And also that, like I said before, there's that risk element. Whereas, with recurring revenue sort of, and I'll sort of talk about some of those later, but with the recurring stuff, versus something like, writing a book or, creating a course or a product or something that you can sell, like a SaaS product or maybe you want to create a proposal, killer.
Templates or whatever.
Those things that's upfront costs and there's risk involved. So, obviously for you, that could have, you might have spent $50,000 worth of your energy and time, and you could have lost all of that. But then hopefully the idea is that you recoup more than that. And something with that too is that, around that idea around passive income, and how I sort of put a bit of a question mark there, it becomes like lower touch for you now once that product is launched, but you still need to like nurture stuff and there's still work involved, I presume, to.
I would say, like the course to me doesn't really feel like passive income because it's just so much work. But I do have another product that is like a lower price, that has like an automatic funnel running. So I guess you would call that passive income, but without constantly, getting people into my funnel, promoting my business to get people into my funnel. There's no sales. Yeah. So it may be passive in the way that it's set up, but I have to actively get people into the funnel in order to get it in front of people. So it's never really, truly, completely passive.
No. Yeah. So there's some work sort of involved in, like outreach or like marketing to try and keep that at the top of people's minds, or else it's going to drop off and that passive income stream is going to dry up.
Exactly. Yeah.
Which sort of does prove that point that nothing is like fundamentally perfectly passive,
Yeah. Yeah. And I think the lower you price something, it's almost just as much work to create something low priced as it is high priced. I mean, in a sense. And so, I think that if you're going to go with like lower price, you have to think about like how many people you have to reach. Yep. When I talk about my bigger course, I have to, sell 2. If I talk about my workflow, I have to sell, to make the same as selling 2, I have to sell like 15. Yeah. So, it is, even though it's passive, it's a lot of work to get 15 sales.
Yep. Yeah. So I was just going to quickly point out what I can see in the world as really easy passive income options for people, just in case they've never thought of them. Some of them are really obvious and they're probably right in front of your face. But most of those sort of things are things that you can actually on-sell and charge extra for. So a really good example is printing costs. If you're a graphic designer, it's actually harder. I believe it's harder for graphic designers to find some of these things than it is for people in the web world. There's a lot of digital stuff that is really, really well set up for, passive income and also recurring revenue, which is, again, we'll talk about that part, recurring revenue stuff, external, in this conversation, but after. But so some of those things could be things like printing, hosting, domain names, anything that you do where you can just kind of add costs on. Maybe you set up a wholesale, a reseller account with someone and you're selling, domain names and SSL certificates and those sorts of things, and you're just actually adding costs on top. There's things like creating products. So maybe you're, even if it's just logos that don't get approved, if you've created them, you could put them on, marketplaces and actually sell them. Again, with a lot of these things.
Design fonts.
Yeah, all of those things, but they're probably not going to go very far without some sort of marketing behind them. And obviously, when we look at something like what you've done, Christine, the bigger the ticket item and the more you invest up front into that, the more marketing you probably want to do around to recoup some of those costs. So, for example, if you have created a logo or some vector assets and you put them on a site that actually sells those things for you, and you can let them run that and you might make a little bit of money. That's a passive income stream. So yeah, I think I'd like to sort of move on to what I consider recurring revenue. This is something that I do, a fair bit of. And I think the differences with those sorts of things are they're actually just tasks that we do and spend our time on that customers come and, pay us for. And it's trying to, I guess, essentially not lock them in, but get them to sort of sign up for a time, and then you can guarantee that income, and that gives you some security around, what you're earning. That might help you scale and those sorts of things. So
gives you like a baseline every month.
Yeah, that's exactly it. Yeah. That's a really important thing with that. And so those sorts of services are broad, and I think they're more obvious in the digital space. So that stuff like SEO, that's like care plans. So, again, care plan gets a little close to passive income because a lot of the care plans you can do essentially, you set and forget stuff. You can have, or very low touch because you're going in and if you've got 50 clients that are on your care plan, you're going in and you're just updating, plugins or whatever it is, doing those.
Sometimes you can get someone to whitelist, you can get someone to do that for you, and then you just mark it up if it's not like your thing, Yeah,
exactly.
You're just the one responsible though,
Yeah, you become you hire a VA, or, if you've got a staff member that can do that sort of stuff, and you essentially find someone else to do that work. but yes, that's a very good point. That brings up that risk factor again. Like with the other passive income stream for with courses and stuff, and there is that risk factor involved. But yeah, with the care plan, some people will package things like time in with those things, as far as like, I'll do 1 hour's worth of updates or 2 hours a week worth of updates for X amount of dollars. And then you can start to see that's not very passive. That's work. So things like SEO, things like content creation, maybe you're doing, social media, you're doing, could be content creation stuff, or maybe it's managing accounts, maybe you're doing pay-per-click. So there's just a whole range of ideas that you can just, find for recurring revenue options. What else? Like email marketing for people.
Would you consider like retainer for, design, where like you've got a client who's established or whatever, and then they need you a certain amount? I remember maybe you can address this. You had a really good response months ago about like retainers being about paying, like what is the difference between time and availability when it comes to like recurring revenue? Yeah.
That's a really good one. So that's essentially, like I was saying before, I think all of the stuff that I've just sort of said then, like thrown out there, they're all more related to this digital stuff, like graphic, web designers and people that make websites. When you're a graphic designer, it's harder to find those things. And generally, it's a retainer. So that's a recurring revenue situation there. And it's hard for people to sort of work out how they can do that. Because obviously with something like SEO, you can sell that as a monthly thing. If you stop doing this, you're going to start losing traffic. If I stop producing your social media content or stop managing your social media feed, you're going to fall off the map. So it's easier to sell those things.
And they're kind of contained too. Like there's you can like kind of set a parameter around what the work is involved every, month on that.
Yeah. And something like SEO, the client's probably never going to send a request for. You're like doing the stuff in the background. They're not like going, can you do this? Can you do this? You're actually just doing the work. So with the graphic design and the retainer stuff, the way that I see that is it's trying to set up a way. So to make it so that you can sell it, you want to make it so that there's this incentive in there. And I think one incentive that people often do is make a price cheaper. So they'll say, like my normal rate is $150 an hour. If you're willing to sign up for, 5 hours a week or, 5 hours a month, I can do the cost at $120 an hour and you'll save money. There you go. Great incentive. Some people will do that. And the thing that I think you're referring to is just the idea that I've talked about a few times, which is that in that, one of the main selling points that you can give to someone is your availability. So if someone is sending me random requests, it's like, okay, I might be able to do that by the end of next week. Like we're busy. If you're on a retainer, what you're buying into or what you're getting is as a part of that, as a benefit, is that we will do the work within this amount of time. We're allocating that we can do that, week in, week out. So that's really, I guess, a strong.
And then they lose, like they'll lose if they aren't prepared, versus like somebody who might be just like on an hourly retainer, trading time for, money.
Yep.
That they're, it's like what happens because it does happen if your client isn't ready with whatever it is that you're supposed to work on that week and you made yourself available.
Yeah.
You have to think about what happens there.
Yeah. And I've thought of this before, and with our design retainers, I've set it up in a way that works for me. And this is the process that I have. And it's essentially that we set a minimum term, and a minimum term is normally 3 months or 6 months, depends on the conversation. And within that, we allow for, because this is a big question, like if someone wants a retainer, what if I don't spend that time? And so we have some flexibility. It depends on how many hours someone's booking in, but generally they're only booking in like a couple of hours a week. So it's, like maybe it's 8 hours a month. And it's people that we just do regular stuff for. And so what we're saying is you can roll over week to week, but not month to month. So if you don't give me something to do this week, then I can do 4 hours for you next week. But at the end of the month, that those 8 hours, if you've done nothing with me and nothing, we've done no work for you, that can't just keep transferring. So at the end of 3 months, we've got like 24 hours worth of work to do in one day. That's not going to happen. And so, yeah, I think that's a fair way to do that. And then what we do is at the end of each sort of 3 months, we step back and actually assess how much time someone's using, because if they're using more time, they get billed, accordingly. And if they're not using enough time, then that's not sort of ideal for them either. So we're trying to make sure, and that's just the way that we sell that. So it's like, we're not just going to ping you for life and just keep, invoicing you for work that no one's doing. But for some people, they're not using all of their time, but it's enough for them to sort of be able to guarantee that they can get that work done, and they don't have to think about it. It's not a huge amount of money that they're investing, and they know if they've got something, it's often where they have a relationship or a business set up where a staff member can actually email us, or maybe it's like a communications manager, and then they don't need to get approval on stuff. They're just sending this, and we can turn around and do it. So that's kind of nice, comfortable work.
That's like a nice way it's a nice mix when you have something established, the brand, the person, you have a good relationship, and you can kind of just, you can mix in with your like stuff that takes more mental energy or whatever.
Yep.
They have those kind of production days where you work on the recurring revenue work.
Yeah. So that's probably the most that I can sort of give around recurring revenue and passive income. Like, breaking down those differences is really important. And it's just really like looking for the services that you have.
Yeah.
And trying to find ways that you can actually package those up so you can sell them to people. So I think,
wouldn't you say like recurring revenue is sort of like that, similar to that one-on-one sale, and and like how we're defining it in this conversation, and the passive is more something that is sold, like one thing sold wide? Is that?
Yeah. No, I totally agree. Yeah. And that's probably again, if you go back to some of those sort of ideas that we just chucked around, where, making a font, that's, you're never going to be able to make that profitable by selling that to one person.
Right.
So the idea is,
you might sell SEO to 50 people, but you're selling it individually, one at a time, and establishing that baseline of clients to create that recurring revenue, where the passive stuff is more of a, one thing that you're trying to leverage.
Yeah. And I think with the recurring revenue, I think it's really important that that's really closely related to the service that you offer. Like, you don't sort of go and stretch yourself too far and think, well, other people do that and they make, recurring revenue. So for example, pay-per-click campaigns, like, do you want to actually do AdWords? Do you want to offer that service? Do you want to spend that time doing that? That's not something that we do. I don't do it. I personally am not interested in it. If I have clients that need that sort of stuff, I've got preferred suppliers. We all work together. We have an open relationship. No one's white labeled. It's all good. But I think it's really important that if you're going to start to try and look for recurring revenue options, that they're just really in line with what it is that you do. So you're not mixing up your message. You're not overcomplicating your process. I mean, we just talked about processes before.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, to be honest, I hate like hosting issues and launching. And, to me, that was the first thing I handed off. And I honestly, I don't think I've launched a website in like 6 years, because it's so tedious. I just don't enjoy it. So that's what I always outsource. And so for me to like be somebody who like manages people's hosting, that's not in line with who I am and what I enjoy.
Yeah.
And so it's for me, it was like, not something that I was really that interested in offering. I would rather give that off or outsource that or whatever to someone else, just because it just didn't line up with who I, the kind of work that I do.
Yeah. And that reminds me of stuff like affiliate marketing. That's like, again, that's a big sort of passive income thing that people talk about. I don't think it's hugely related to our industry. I think, there's a lot of, that's almost like an entrepreneur or someone that's like a social influencer. And potentially with what you've done, where you've created a course, there would be opportunities for someone like you to be able to promote people and make money from affiliate marketing. But generally for, a person that's running a small studio or a freelancer, again, they're almost like, don't sort of fool yourself in trying to go out and find these things that you hear other people talking about that don't really align to the work that you do.
And to that point, I really feel like that those were two separate businesses, two separate audiences. It is possible to create like a passive product to, a client base that you're already serving.
Yep.
For me, they were completely separate businesses. It was really hard to switch back and forth between the client work, the one-on-one stuff, and the passive stuff. It was almost easier to just, take one and run with it, or take the other and run with it. Just mentally, the energy involved. So that's just my own personal experience that I always found myself wanting to do one or the other, but it was difficult to do both.
Yeah. You can't spread yourself too thin. And I think so that's like, if we just listed out all ideas around, recurring revenue and passive income, it's like that you want to just focus on things that work for you. And I mean, unless you're looking,
that's related to what you're doing, like if you can find that recurring revenue source that's, complements what you're already doing, that's the best place to start, I think.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I think, again, that probably covers the everything that I need to sort of bring up about recurring revenue and passive income. Are you happy with everything? Yeah. Perfect. Yeah, all right. Well, let's wrap this one up and call it a day.
All right.
Thanks, Christine.